Hello, all. Welcome to maybe it's day 12. We'll say it's day 12. Welcome to day 12 of Northanger Abbey, the book where nothing Gothic happens very often or ever so far, but we'll just have to wait and see. Today I feel emotionally like there's not physically, like there's a big old ball of yarn in my chest, and it was being stretched really, like it was all caught up together because it was being pulled tight, and it feels like it got some slack back into it today, so that feels really nice. So I hope that your personal ball of yarn in your chest feels okay today too, but I know that that can be really hard sometimes. And I hope that you can do something that makes your personal ball of yarn feel okay. I have today. I love these little Horizon chocolate milk things. I used to get them as a treat when I was a kid, and now I still get them as a treat because they're like 99 cents, and I'm like, it's a steal. A chocolate milk box for 99 cents. So do something that's fun for you today. Look at this cool thing I made for my brother. He's probably not gonna like it, but that's okay. Look how pretty it is. I painted it all myself. I'm not very good. I mean, I'm okay. Obviously, I can mostly keep in the lines. But it's really cool. I got this set of, a while ago, of watercolors from Michaels. And I didn't get the most expensive one because I was like, probably not going to use that much. Thank you. Thanks, Shiv. But they're semi-moist praying. This is a Michaels broadcast. Michaels approved this message. They're really good. They're like a really pigmented. Oh, okay. That is okay. Thank you for coming to whatever you can. They're just really good watercolors. There's no pink though. I'm quite upset by that. I was trying to make my own pink, but it didn't go. Where am I? Didn't go very well. Didn't make the pinkest of pinks, unfortunately for moi. So let's get into Northanger Abbey. We'll get as much. I'll speed read for you, Shiv. We'll get as far as we can. What happened yesterday? So yesterday, Catherine has agreed to go on a walk with the Tilney siblings, elder and younger. She's very excited about this, but Miss Tilney was like, I can't go if it rains, though. And then, of course, what happens? It rains. And so they're supposed to come at 12, and they don't come at 12 because it's raining. And by 12:30, it's like still raining. Then eventually it clears up, and she's like, I don't think they're going to come, but maybe they will. But then who pulls up but John Thorpe and James Moreland and Isabella Thorpe? And they're like, you should come on a drive with us. We're going to go do really cool stuff. And I'm going to crack my neck. Beautiful. So they're like, come on a drive with us. We're going to go really cool places. It's going to be really great. And Catherine's like, I would love to, but I don't really like John. And also the Tilney siblings are going to come take a walk with me. And John's like, oh, the Tilney siblings? You mean the Tilney siblings that I saw driving off to blah, 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 something rock or something? And Catherine's like, oh, that's weird, but okay, I guess if they like drove off, I guess I can go with you. And so they drive off, and then as they're driving, she's like, oh my God, that's the Tilney siblings coming to my door. And she's like, John, pull over. And John's like, I will not. And at which point this became a kidnapping novel. John didn't pull over. They only made it halfway to where they wanted to go. And that's the only reason Catherine was like, I feel okay about this, because eventually I'm going to get to see a really cool castle. But of course, nobody got to see the castle. And she went back, and now she's like, she didn't leave a note for Miss Tilney. So now she's like in it bad with the Tilneys. And John is just being John. So that's what's up in Northanger, excuse me, in Northanger Abbey today. So, okay, let's do it. I'm ready. Northanger Abbey, Chapter 12. Mrs. Allen, said Catherine the next morning, will there be any harm in my calling on Miss Tilney today? I shall not be easy till I have explained everything. Go by all means, my dear. Only put on a white gown. Miss Tilney always wears white. Catherine cheerfully complied, and being properly equipped, was more impatient than ever to be at the pump room, that she might inform herself of General Tilney's lodgings, for though she believed they were in Milsom Street, she was not certain of the house, and Mrs. Allen's wavering convictions only made it more doubtful. To Milsom Street she was directed, and having made herself perfect in the number, hastened away with eager steps and a beating heart to pay her visit, explain her conduct, and be forgiven. Tripping lightly through the churchyard, and resolutely turning away her eyes that she might not be obliged to see her beloved Isabella and her dear family, who, she had reason to believe, were in a shop hard by. She reached the house without any impediment, looked at the number, knocked at the door, and inquired for Miss Tilney. The man believed Miss Tilney to be at home, but was not certain. Would she be pleased to send up her name? She gave her card. In a few minutes the servant returned with a look which did not quite confirm his words, said he had been mistaken, for that Miss Tilney was walked out. Ruh-roh. This is not good. Catherine, with a blush of mortification, left the house. She felt almost persuaded that Miss Tilney was at home, and too much offended to admit her, and as she retired down the street, could not withhold one glance at the drawing-room windows, in expectation of seeing her there, but no one appeared at them. At the bottom of the street, however, she looked back again, and then not at a window, but issuing from the door, she saw Miss Tilney herself. Oh no. She was followed by a gentleman whom Catherine believed to be her father, and they turned up towards Edgar's buildings. Catherine, in deep mortification, proceeded on her way. She could almost be angry at herself at such angry incivility, but she checked the resentful sensation. She remembered her own ignorance. She knew not how such an offense as hers might be classed by the laws of worldly politeness, to what a degree of unforgivingness it might with propriety lead, nor to what rigors of rudeness in return it might justly make her amenable. Dejected and humbled, she had even some thoughts of not going with the others to the theatre that night, but it must be confessed that they were not of long continuance, for she soon recollected, in the first place, that she was without any excuse for staying at home, and in the second, that it was a play she wanted very much to see. To the theatre, accordingly, they all went. No Tilneys appeared to plague or please her. She feared that, amongst the many perfections of the family, a fondness for plays was not to be ranked. But perhaps it was because they were habituated to the finer performances of the London stage, which she knew, on Isabella's authority, rendered everything else of the kind quite horrid. She was not deceived in her own expectation of pleasure. The comedy so well suspended her care that no one, observing her during the first 4 acts, would have supposed she had any wretchedness about her. On the beginning of the 5th, however, the sudden view of Mr. Henry Tilney and his father joining a party in the opposite box recalled her to anxiety and distress. The stage could no longer excite genuine merriment, no longer keep her whole attention. Every other look upon an average was directed towards the opposite box, and for the space of 2 entire scenes did she thus watch Henry Tilney without being once able to catch his eye. No longer could he be suspected of indifference for a play. His notice was never withdrawn from the stage during 2 whole scenes. At length, however, he did look towards her, and he bowed, but such a bow! No smile, no continued observance attended it. His eyes were immediately returned to their former direction. Catherine was restlessly miserable. She could almost have run round to the box in which he sat and forced him to hear her explanation. Feelings rather natural than heroic possessed her. Instead of considering her own dignity injured by this ready condemnation, instead of proudly resolving in conscious innocence to show her resentment towards him who could harbor a doubt of it, to leave to him all the trouble of seeking an explanation, and to enlighten him on the past only by avoiding his sight or flirting with somebody else, she took to herself all the shame of misconduct, or at least of its appearance, and was only eager for an opportunity of explaining its cause. The play concluded, the curtain fell. Henry Tilney was no longer to be seen where he had hitherto sat, but his father remained, and perhaps he might be now coming round to their box. She was right. In a few minutes he appeared, and making his way through Then Thinning rose, spoke with a calm politeness to Mrs. Allen and her friend. Not with such calmness was he answered by the latter. Um, I guess her friend must be Catherine. Oh, Mr. Tilney, I have been quite wild to speak to you and make my apologies. You must have thought me so rude, but indeed it was not my own fault. Oh, sorry, one of my postcards just fell and startled me. um, you must have thought me so rude, but indeed it was not my own fault. Was it, Mrs. Allen? Did they not tell me that Mr. Tilney and his sister were gone out in a phaeton together? And then what could I do? But I had 10,000 times rather have been with you, now had I not, Mrs. Allen. My dear, you tumble my gown, was Mrs. Allen's reply. Her assurance, however, standing sole as it did, was not thrown away. It brought a more cordial, more natural smile into his countenance, and he replied in a tone which retained only a little affected reserve. We were much obliged to you at any rate for wishing us a pleasant walk after our passing you in Argyle Street. You were so kind as to look back on purpose. What? Is he just saying that it's nice that she was like, ah! leaning out of the carriage? What? But indeed, I did not wish you a pleasant walk. I never thought of such a thing. But I begged Mr. Thorpe so earnestly to stop. I called out to him as soon as ever I saw you. Now, Mrs. Allen did not. Oh, you were not there. But indeed I did. And Mr. Thorpe would only have stopped. I would have jumped out and ran after you. Is there a Henry in the world who could not be insensible to such a declaration? Henry Tilney, at least, was not. Yet with a sweeter smile, he said everything that need be said of his sister's concern, regret, and dependence on Catherine's honor. Oh, do not say Miss Tilney was not angry, cried Catherine, because I know she was, for she would not see me this morning when I called. I saw her walk out of the house the next minute after my leaving it. I was hurt, but I was not affronted. Perhaps you did not know I had been there. I was not within at the time, but I heard of it from Eleanor, and she has been wishing ever since to see you, to explain the reason of such incivility, but perhaps I can do it as well. It was nothing more than that my father, they were just preparing to walk out, and he, being hurried for time and not caring to have it put off, made a point of her being denied. That was all, I do assure you. She was very much vexed, and meant to make her apology as soon as possible. Oh, this is cute. Oh my God, that's the end of the chapter. No, I mean, not here. Catherine's mind was greatly eased by this information, yet a something of solicitude remained, from which sprang the following question, thoroughly artless in itself, though rather distressing to the gentleman. But, Mr. Tilney, why were you less generous than your sister? If she felt such confidence in my good intentions, and could suppose it only to be a mistake, why should you be so ready to take offense? Me? I take offense? Nay, I'm sure by your look when you came into the box you were angry. I angry? I could have no right. Listen, we've all been there. Well, nobody would have thought you had no right who saw your face. He replied by asking her to make room for him and talking of the play. He remained with them some time and was only too agreeable for Catherine to be contented when he went away. Before they parted, however, it was agreed that the projected walk should be taken as soon as possible, and setting aside the misery of his quitting their box, she was, upon the whole, left one of the happiest creatures in the world. While talking to each other, she had observed with some surprise that John Thorpe, who was never in the same part of the house for 10 minutes together, was engaged in conversation with General Tilney, and she felt something more than surprised when she thought she could perceive herself the object of their attention and discourse. Oh, no. What could they have to say of her? She feared General Tilney did not like her appearance. She found it was implied in his preventing her admittance to his daughter, rather than postpone his own walk a few minutes. How came Mr. Thorpe to know your father? Was her anxious inquiry as she pointed them out to her companion. He knew nothing about it, but his father, like every military man, had a very large acquaintance. When the entertainment was over, Thorpe came to assist them in getting out. Catherine was the immediate object of his gallantry, and while they waited in the lobby for a chair, he prevented the inquiry which had traveled from her heart almost to the tip of her tongue, by asking in an inconsequential manner whether she had seen him talk with General Tilney. He's a fine old fellow, upon my soul, stout, active, looks as young as his son. I have a great regard for him, I assure you. A gentlemanlike, good sort of fellow as ever lived. But how came you to know him? Know him? There are a few people much about the town that I do not know. I have met him forever at Bedford, and I know his face again today, the moment he came into the billiard room. One of the best players we have by and by, and we had a little touch together, though I was almost afraid of him at first. The odds were 5-4 against me, and if I had not made one of the cleanest strokes that perhaps ever was made in the world, I took his ball exactly, but I could not make you understand it without a table. But however, I did beat him. All right. Incoming is another anti-Semitic remark coming from Henry, who has twice been anti-Semitic. Well, we don't stand him. A very fine fellow, as rich as a Jew. Yikes. I should like to dine with him, I dare say, if he gives famous dinners. But what do you think we have been talking of? You. Yes, by heavens. And the general thinks you the finest girl in Bath. I do not trust a word out of this man's mouth. Oh, nonsense. How can you say so? And what do you think I said, lowering his voice? Well done, General, said I. I am quite of your mind. Ugh. Here Catherine, who was much less gratified by his admiration than General Tilney's, was not sorry to be called away by Mr. Allen. Thorpe, however, would see her to her chair, and till she entered it continued the same kind of delicate flattery, in spite of her entreating him to have done. That General Tilney, instead of disliking, should admire her was very delightful, and she joyfully thought that there was not one of the family whom she need now fear to meet. The evening had done much, much more for her than could have been expected. All right, I'm going to try for another chapter. We'll see how it goes. Oh, boy, hold on. I got the time. I got the time, you got the patience, we got the bandwidth. Oh, shoot. I love not charging my computer when I could very easily be charging my computer. Okay. Northanger Abbey, Volume 1, Chapter 13. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday have now passed in review before the reader. The events of each day, its hopes and fears, mortifications and pleasures, have been separately stated, and the pangs of Sunday only now remain to be described, and close the week. The Clifton scheme had been deferred. What? Who's Clifton? Not relinquished, and on the afternoon's crescent of this day, it was brought forward again, in private consultation between Isabella and James. Oh, they're going to go to that castle. The former of whom had particularly set her heart upon going, and the latter no less anxiously placed his upon pleasing her. It was agreed that, I don't like my frame. I'm getting a haircut. That's what they call it in cinematography, when you cut off the top of your person's head. It's a haircut. I love it. It's weird. I don't actually like it, but it's just a funny word. I'm still doing it. No, I can't stop. It was agreed that, provided the weather were fair, the party should take place on the following morning, and they were to set off very early, in order to be at home in good time. The affair thus determined, and Thorpe's approbation secured, Catherine only remained to be apprised of it. She had left them for a few minutes to speak to Miss Tilney. In that interval the plan was completed, and as soon as she came again, her agreement was demanded. But instead of the gay acquiescence expected by Isabella, Catherine looked grave, was very sorry, but could not go. The engagement which ought to have kept her from joining in the former attempt would make it impossible for her to accompany them now. She had that moment settled with Miss Tilney to take their promised walk tomorrow. It was quite determined, and she would not upon any account retract. But that she must and should retract was instantly the cry of both of the Thorpes. They must go to Clifton tomorrow. They would not go without her. It would be nothing to put off a mere walk for one day longer, and they would not hear of a refusal. These are awful friends. If you have friends like this, trash can. Catherine was distressed, but not subdued. Do not urge me, Isabella. I am engaged to Miss Tilney. I cannot go. This availed nothing. The same arguments assailed her again. She must go, she should go, and they would not hear of a refusal. It would be so it would be so easy to tell Miss Tilney that you had just been reminded of a prior engagement and was only begged to put off the walk till Tuesday. No, it would not be easy. I could not do it. There's been no prior engagement. But Isabella became only more and more urgent, calling on her in the most affectionate manner, addressing her by the most endearing names. She was sure her dearest, sweetest Catherine would not seriously refuse such a trifling request to a friend who loved her so dearly. She knew her beloved Catherine to have so feeling a heart. Ow, sorry. My neck started to hurt. Ouchie, mama. Sorry, let me just massage my neck. Is this what everyone's looking for? Okay, we're good. She knew her beloved Catherine to have so feeling a heart, so sweet a temper, and to be so easily persuaded by those she loved. But all in vain. Catherine felt herself to be in the right, and she was. And though pained by such tender, such flattering supplication, could not allow it to influence her. Isabella then tried another method. She reproached her having more affection for Miss Tilney, though she had known her so little while, than for her best and oldest friends, with being grown cold and indifferent, in short, towards herself. I cannot help being jealous, Catherine, when I see myself slighted for strangers, I who love you so excessively. This girl is emotionally abusing Catherine. When once my affections are placed, it is not then the power of anything to change them. But I believe my feelings are stronger than anybody's. I am sure they are too strong for my own peace. And to see myself supplanted in your friendship by strangers does cut me to the quick, I own. These Tilneys seem to swallow up everything else. Catherine thought this reproach equally strange and unkind. Catherine is the queen of not accepting this. I love her. Was it the part of a friend thus to expose her feelings to the notice of others? Isabella appeared to her ungenerous and selfish, regardless of everything but her own gratification. Snaps. The painful ideas crossed her mind, though she had said nothing. Isabella, in the meanwhile, had applied her handkerchief to her eyes, and Morland, miserable at such a sight, could not help saying, "Nay, Catherine, I think you cannot stand out any longer. The sacrifice is not much, and to oblige such a friend. I shall think you quite unkind if you refuse. You still refuse." This was the first time of her brother's openly siding against her, and anxious to avoid his displeasure, she proposed a compromise. They would only put off their scheme till Tuesday, which they might easily do, as it depended only on themselves. She could go with them, and everybody might be satisfied. But no, was the immediate answer. That could not do for... I think this is the brother. No, that was the answer. That could not do, for Thorpe did not know he might not go to town on Tuesday. Catherine was sorry, but could do no more, and a short silence ensued, which was broken by Isabella, who in a voice of cold resentment said, "Very well, then, there is an end of the party. If Catherine does not go, I cannot be the only woman. I would not, upon any account in the world, do so improper a thing." Catherine, you must go," said James. But why cannot Mr. Thorpe drive one of his other sisters? I dare say either of them would like to go. "Thank you," cried Thorpe, "but I did not come to Bath to drive my sisters about and look like a fool. No, if you don't go, damn me if I do. I only go for the sake of driving you." Are you ready for this? That is a compliment which gives me no pleasure, but her word, yes! But her words were lost on Thorpe, who had turned abruptly away. The three others still continued together, walking in a most uncomfortable manner to poor Catherine. Sometimes not a word was said, sometimes she was again attacked with supplications or reproaches, and her arm was still linked with Isabella's, though their hearts were at war. At one moment she was softened, at another irritated, always distressed, but always steady. "I did not think you had been so obstinate, Catherine," said James. "You were not used to be so hard to persuade. You once were the kindest, best-tempered of my sisters." This is emotional abuse. If any of your friends treat you like this, it's not right. "I hope I am not less so now," she replied very feelingly. "But indeed I cannot go. If I am wrong, I am doing what I believe to be right." "I suspect," said Isabella in a low voice, "there is no great struggle." Catherine's heart swelled. She drew away her arm, and Isabella made no opposition. Thus passed a long 10 minutes till they were again joined by Thorpe, who, coming to them with a gayer look, said, "Well, I've settled the matter, and now we may all go tomorrow with safe conscience." "I've been to Miss Tilney and made your excuses." "You have not," cried Catherine. "He has not. I'm going straight back to Miss Tilney. I'm going to a time machine and I'm going back to smack these people. They cannot treat her like that. I have, upon my soul, left her this moment. Told her you had sent me to say that having just recollected a prior engagement of going to Clifton with us tomorrow, you could not have the pleasure of walking with her till Tuesday. She said very well, Tuesday was just as convenient to her, so there is an end of all our difficulties. A pretty good thought of mine, hey? Disgusting. Disgusting. Isabella's countenance was once more all smiles and good humor, and James too looked happy again. Okay, I think it's James. I don't know. Maybe Isabella. We're going to try it. A most heavenly thought indeed. Now, my sweet Catherine, all our distresses are over. You are honorably acquitted, and we shall have a most delightful party. This will not do, said Catherine. I cannot submit to this. I must run after Miss Tilney directly and set her right. Isabella, however, caught hold of one hand, Thorpe of the other. Oh my God! And remonstrances poured in from all three. Even James was quite angry. When everything was settled, when Miss Tilney herself said that Tuesday would suit her well, it was quite ridiculous, quite absurd to make any further objection. Here's the thing. I don't believe John went and talked to Miss Tilney. Why are these three so awful? Okay, there we go. I do not care. Mr. Thorpe had no business to invent any such message. If I had thought it right to put it off, I could have spoken to Miss Tilney myself. This is only doing it in a ruder way. And how do I know that Mr. Thorpe has... He may be mistaken again, perhaps. Snaps! He led me into one act of rudeness by his mistake on Friday. Let me go, Mr. Thorpe. Isabella, do not hold me. Thorpe told her it would be in vain to go after the Tilneys. They were turning the corner into Brock Street when he had overtaken them and were at home by this time. Then I will go after them, said Catherine. Wherever they are, I will go after them. It does not signify talking. If I could not be persuaded into doing what I thought wrong, I will never be tricked into it. Damn right. I adore her. And with these words, she broke away and hurried off. Thorpe would have darted after her, but Moreland withheld him. Let her go, she would go. She is as obstinate as... Thorpe never finished the simile, for it could hardly have been a proper one. Away walked Catherine in great agitation, as fast as the crowd would permit her, fearful of being pursued, yet determined to persevere. As she walked, she reflected on what had passed. It was painful to her to disappoint and displease them, particularly displease her brother, but she could not repent her resistance. Setting her own inclination apart, to have failed the second time in her engagement to Miss Tilney, to have retracted a promise voluntarily made only 5 minutes before, and on a false pretense, too, must have been wrong. She had not been withstanding them on selfish principles alone. She had not consulted merely her own gratification. That might have been ensured in some degree by the excursion itself. By seeing Blaise Castle, no. She had attended to what was due to others, and to her own character in their opinion. Her conviction of being right, however, was not enough to restore her composure. Till she had spoken to Miss Tilney, she could not be at ease, and quickening her pace, when she got clear of the crescent, she almost ran over the remaining ground till she gained the top of Milsom Street. So rapid had been her movements that in spite of the Tilneys' advantage in the outset, they were but just turning into their lodgings as she came within view of them, and the servant still remaining at the open door, she used only the ceremony of saying she must speak with Miss Tilney that moment, and hurrying him proceeded up the stairs. Then, opening the first door before her, which happened to be the right, she immediately found herself in the drawing room with General Tilney, his son, and daughter. Her explanation, defective only in being, from her irritation of nerves and shortness of breath, no explanation of all, was instantly given. I'm come in a great hurry. It was all a mistake. I never promised to go. I'm told from them the first I could not go. Oh, wait. I told them from the first I could not go. I ran away in a great hurry to explain it. I did not care what you thought of me. I would I would not stay for the servant. The business, however, though not perfectly elucidated by this speech, soon ceased to be a puzzle. Catherine found that John Thorpe had given the message, and Miss Tilney had no scruple in owning herself greatly surprised by it. But whether her brother had still exceeded her in resentment, Catherine, though she instinctively addressed herself as much to one as to the other in her vindication, had no means of knowing. Whatever might have been felt before her arrival, her eager declarations immediately made every look and sentence as friendly as she could desire. The affair thus happily ended. She was introduced by Miss Tilney to her father, and received by him with such ready, such solicitous politeness as recalled Thorpe's information to her mind, and made her think with pleasure that he might be sometimes depended on. I lost the plot. To such anxious attention was the general civility aware of her extraordinary swiftness in entering the house, he was quite angry with the servant, whose neglect had reduced her to open the door of the apartment herself. What did William mean by it? He should make a point of inquiring to the matter. And if Catherine had not most warmly asserted his innocence, it seemed likely that William would lose the favor of his master forever, if not his place, by her rapidity. After sitting with them a quarter of an hour, she rose to take leave, and was then most agreeably surprised by General Tilney's asking her if she would do his daughter the honor of dining and spending the rest of the day with her. Miss Tilney added her own wishes. Catherine was greatly obliged, but it was quite out of her power. Mr. and Mrs. Allen would expect her back every moment. The general declared he could say no more. The claims of Mr. and Mrs. Allen were not to be superseded, but on some other day he trusted, when longer notice could be given, they would not refuse to spare her to her friend. I think this is the general again. Oh no, Catherine was sure they would not. Oh wait, never mind. This is like a. Okay. It's like sometimes she'll write like dialogue that's already passed, but in the perspective of the author. When I say she, I mean Jane. So she said, oh no, Catherine was sure they would not have the least objection, and she should have the greatest pleasure in coming. The general attended her himself to the street door, saying everything gallant as they went downstairs, admiring the elasticity of her walk, which corresponded exactly with the spirit of her dancing, and making her one of the most graceful bows he had ever beheld when they parted. Catherine, delighted by all that had passed, proceeded gaily to Pulteney Street, walking, as she concluded, with great elasticity, though she had never thought of it before. She reached home without seeing anything more of the offended party, and now that she had been triumphant throughout, had carried her point, and was secured of her walk, she began, as the flutter of her spirit subsided, to doubt whether she had been perfectly right. A sacrifice was always noble, and if she had given way to their entreaties, she should have been spared the distressing idea of a friend displeased, a brother angry, and a scheme of great happiness to both destroyed, perhaps through her means. To ease her mind and ascertain by the opinion of an unprejudiced person that her own conduct had really been, of what her own conduct had really been, she took occasions to mention before Mr. Allen the half-settled scheme of her brother and the Thorpes for the following day. Mr. Allen caught at it directly. Well, said he, and do you think of going too? No, I had just engaged myself to walk with Miss Tilney before they told me of it, and therefore you know I could not go with them, could I? No, certainly not, and I am glad you do not think of it. These schemes are not at all things. Young men and women driving about the country in open carriages. Now and then it is very well, but going to inns and public places together, it is not right, and I wonder Mrs. Thorpe should allow it. I am glad you do not think of going. I am sure Mrs. Morland would not be pleased. Mrs. Allen, are not you of my way of thinking? Do not you think these kind of projects objectionable? Yes, very much so indeed. Open carriages are nasty things. A clean gown is not 5 minutes wearing them. You are splashed getting in and out, and the wind takes your hair and your bonnet in every direction. I hate an open carriage myself. I know you do, but that is not the question. Do not you think it an odd appearance if young ladies are frequently driven about in them by young men to whom they are not even related? Yes, my dear, a very odd appearance indeed. I cannot bear to see it. Dear madam, cried Catherine, then why did you not tell me so before? I am sure if I had known it to be improper, I would not have gone with Mr. Thorpe at all. But I always hoped you would tell me if you thought I was doing wrong. And so I should, my dear, you may depend on it, for as I told Mrs. Morland at parting, I would always do the best for you in my power. But one must not be over particular. Young people will be young people, and as your good mother says herself, you know I wanted you when we first came not to buy that sprigged muslin, but you would. Young people do not like to be always thwarted. But this was something of real consequence, and I do not think you would have found me hard to persuade. As far as it has gone hitherto, there is no way. This is the wrong one. A spam email. Wow. As far as it has gone hitherto, there is no harm, said Mr. Allen, and I would only advise you, my dear, not to go out with Mr. Thorpe any more. That is just what I was going to say, added his wife. Catherine, relieved for herself, felt uneasy for Isabella, and after a moment's thought, asked Mr. Allen whether it would not be both proper and kind in her to write to Miss Thorpe and explain the indecorum of which she must be as insensible as herself, for she considered that Isabella might otherwise perhaps be going to Clifton the next day, in spite of what had passed. Mr. Allen, however, discouraged her from doing any such thing. You had better leave her alone, my dear. She is old enough to know what she is about, and if not, has a mother to advise her. Mrs. Thorpe is too indulgent beyond a doubt. But however, you had better not interfere. She and your brother choose to go, and you will be only getting ill will. Catherine submitted, and though sorry to think that Isabella should be doing wrong, felt greatly relieved by Mr. Allen's approbation of her own conduct, and truly rejoiced to be preserved by his advice from the danger of falling into such an error herself. Her escape from being one of the party to Clifton was now an escape indeed, for what would the Tilneys have thought of her if she had broken her promise to them in order to do what was wrong in itself? If she had been guilty of one breach of propriety, only to enable her to be guilty of another. And that is the end of that chapter. Beautiful. What fun. I've kind of I'm really vibing with this book. I think talking about young women or ballad and especially those interactions, Catherine standing up for herself while her friends are trying to persuade her to do something that she knows even if it's not wrong is just rude and impolite. That's really important to read, and I'm just really excited that that topic is being explored. So anyways, yeah, that's what I have to say today about that. I have other things to say, but not to you. My roommates and I are going to watch all the Studio Ghibli films together. It's going to be great. Last night we watched Kiki's Delivery Service, and I'm just every time the cat came on screen, I just screamed. It was beautiful. It was such a good cat. Best animated cat I've ever seen. So wonderful. I just really appreciate a good Gigi the animated cat. Okay. I'm going to log off because my throat hurts. I'm going to go make myself some tea. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Eat something fun. Love yourself. Have a good day. Okay. Goodbye. That was a weird goodbye. That's all I can give you.